Once again to the Duct Tape Studios. I'm Jeff McAleer, your host here at the Gaming Gang channel. Thanks for joining me once again. Today I am going to share my review of the Pathfinder Remastered Player Core from Paizo Inc. The lead writers on this book are Logan Bonner, Jason Bullman, Stephen Radney McFarland, and Mark Seifter. The 464-page hardcover is available now, carries an MSRP of $59.99, or you can grab just the PDF alone for $19.99. All right, all that said, let's swing on over to the other camera because here I've got the player core for Pathfinder Remastered. A few things I want to mention before we dive on in. First of all, my friends over at Paizo Inc. were kind enough to provide me with this review copy, but neither I nor anyone else affiliated with the Gaming Gang has received any other sort of compensation for me to share this review with you. These days, it's very, very important that you know that. We're also not going to look at each and every page of this book, but I do want to give you a good feel for what's in the player core and discuss my thoughts about it too. Lastly, I am not going to approach this by discussing every tiny mechanical change that has been made with this remastered edition as opposed to second edition. And keep in mind, this is a remaster. This is not a brand new edition. This is not a third edition of Pathfinder. It still even says right on the book, second edition. I will talk about the main reason why we have these 4 new volumes, which are arriving. 2 of them are already here, the player core and the GM core, which I just did a first look video of the GM core. So stay tuned. I'll have a review of that in just a little bit. But I'm approaching this to discuss what is different overall, what are some of the big changes, as well as why would somebody want to check out the remastered Pathfinder? Now, there are a lot of people out there who are very interested in Pathfinder. Maybe they've been scared off because they've been told it's far, far too crunchy, or there's a lot of math involved, or you have to buy all these different books in order to play it properly or to run it properly. Well, I'm going to set a lot of people straight as far as that goes. Now, I will mention, if you want to get into the nitty gritty, get down into the mechanics and the moving parts of Pathfinder 2nd Edition, as well as Pathfinder Remastered, I highly recommend you check out Ron, the Rules Lawyer. His videos are fantastic, and he is certainly not a shill because there are things that he loves about Pathfinder, and there are things that he's not too keen on. But I'll tell you what, you will learn all you need to know about Pathfinder 2nd Edition and Remastered Pathfinder from Ron, the Rules Lawyer. Okay, so we're going to get into it. We've got our introduction here. Pathfinder, of course, is a fantasy role-playing game. It is built upon the original mechanics of Dungeons and Dragons 3.5 and moved on from there. So one aspect of the remastered books is that all reference to the Dungeons and Dragons SRD are gone. So there are some things that have been completely dropped. Many things have been renamed or kind of reskinned a little bit. So now Pathfinder stands on its own. It is no longer part of the open game license. It is part of the open RPG creative license, otherwise known as ORC, which had come about. We'll talk a little bit more about the open game license fiasco and why we actually have these remastered books. So this is all player-facing content here throughout this book. We're going to see a lot of information about character creation. So we're going to have 8 different classes. We've got 8 different ancestries. There will be some classes, some ancestries that are not in this player core that are coming in player core 2 next summer. And I'm sure there are some folks out there who are a little disappointed to see maybe their favorite race or favorite class is no longer in the, I guess, core rule book. But there is an errata that came out, and it is actually jam-packed with content as far as utilizing classes that are coming in the Player Core 2 with remastered Pathfinder. So I really appreciate the fact that Paizo has released this document, which has some errata from this book. Yes, there is errata for this book. Sad to say, but it's just how things work. But you'll be able to still utilize your favorite character ancestries and character classes. There's going to be some tweaks here and there that you'll have to make, but there's a lot of conversion information in the errata document that came out. Now, there might even be more content out there. I'm just aware of the fairly robust PDF release that came out actually when the Player Core and GM Core PDFs hit. So what you're going to do is you're going to create your character. You're going to have your traditional attributes. We are going to have our strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. Gone are the ranges of 3 to 18 to get modifiers. You're simply going to utilize modifiers. Character creation is very in-depth with Pathfinder, but you're not going to be rolling up for your attributes or anything along those lines. You are going to pick exactly what you want. So what you'll do is based on your ancestry, you're going to get bonuses as well as a negative modifier to one attribute. Based on your background, you're going to see more of your attributes get bonuses. Then, of course, your character class is going to give you bonuses. So a starting character cannot have an attribute of lower than -1 or higher than +4. But you will certainly be able to concoct the sort of character that you want to play in a fantasy role-playing game with Pathfinder Remastered. I say it all the time, and this has not changed. I do not know of a fantasy role-playing game that has so much customizability for the player characters. There is tons in here because not only do you have the different ancestries, different classes, you got the different backgrounds, and then you have feats, and then you have spells, then you have magic items. It is just jam-packed with options available for players to tweak and tune their characters however they like. Now, if you're a min-maxer sort of player, Pathfinder's for you. If you are someone who just wants to create a character that you're happy with, that you enjoy their backstory and how you've picked the different feats and things like that, you don't really care how well they mesh together, well, guess what? Pathfinder is for you too. So here we see all the various different backgrounds that are available. I should point out, as far as the production quality of the book, very nicely done. I really do like the second edition art style as opposed to first edition Pathfinder. So once again, we're seeing a bit more of a realistic look to the artwork. We have all of those origin characters are still present throughout the artwork too. So that has not changed. Paper stock, pretty nice. It's about what we find in most major role-playing game publishers' books. So very similar to, say, Dungeons and Dragons books from Wizards of the Coast. I would say maybe the paper stock's a little bit thicker. Now, it's important to keep in mind that we have the player core, we have the GM core. Combined, they clock in at just under 800 pages. But There's a reason why we've got 2 volumes here, because the original core book that came out for second edition clocked in over 600 pages, and it's a little tough to have a role-playing game volume that's going to see a lot of use at your table with that high a page count. It is just difficult for that book to still hold together after repeated use. So that is one of the reasons why we've got the 2 books. I guarantee you that, because when second edition Pathfinder originally came out, the first print run, there were some issues people had with the book not holding up. And we're not talking after repeated use. We're talking about reading through the book once. So thankfully, that's way in the past, but that is also a reason why the core materials for Pathfinder have been broken out into 2 volumes. So as you can see, I was talking about the origin characters. So we still have all the origin characters and the various different classes. So we do have the 8 classes. We've got the Bard, Cleric, Druid, Fighter, Ranger, Rogue, Witch, and Wizard. And yes, my favorite class, the Champion, is not in the player core, but it is in that conversion document. So I thought that was very cool too. So we're going to get all the information that we need about each of the classes. Now, I will say that just from my reading through this, the Cleric does seem to be buffed a little bit more than the second edition. And magic users on a whole, I don't want to say they're nerfed, but they're a little less powerful. And I'll talk about that when I get into the spells and spell casting. And to be very honest with you, I think it balances better the way that these classes have been put together. Because one aspect of fantasy role-playing games that is an issue just about with every fantasy role-playing game is the fact that we've got the power creep, especially with magic users, as their levels increase. So the martial characters kind of get left in the dust with the exciting things that they're able to do, as opposed to the magic users. Now, granted, with Pathfinder, we do have all the various feats, which really do allow for some really unique characters. But still, when we start seeing the higher level adventuring, the magic users kind of take the spotlight in some ways. So I think toning things down a little bit is good for the overall balance of the classes. So just kind of showing you all the various classes here. Now, I do like how we have this sidebar that runs through, because as we hit different sections of the book, it kind of telescopes in for us. So here we've got classes. Now it's going to give us introduction. Here's the Bard. Here's the Rogue. Here's the Ranger. I'll skip ahead. There's the Rogue. So it's highlighted. But once we get past the classes section, then it no longer telescopes in. It moves back out, and then it's showing the information about the next section. So I really do like that quite a lot. So just jumping on through, as you can see, the greatest amount of page space is devoted to the various different character classes. A close second is going to be the magic section with all the various different spells. So we also have different archetypes. And then we get into skills. So you will have various skills available to you by way of your class. You have various different proficiency tiers, from untrained to trained, and then a few different tiers up to legendary. And essentially what they do is they allow you a bonus. So if you are untrained, you get 0 added to your D20 roll. Now, as far as our action resolution, that has not changed. You are still looking at rolling a 20-sided die, having a DC, having a difficulty class that you need to meet or exceed. And you normally will not know as a player, what the difficulty class is. The game master knows. So what you're doing is you're rolling your 20-sided die, you're adding any bonuses that you might have, subtracting any negative modifiers you may have, and then you're looking to meet or exceed that DC, that difficulty class. Now, if you happen to exceed the number by 10 or more, then that is a critical success. And if you happen to fail by 10 or more, that is a critical failure. That, in essence, is your action resolution. Now, of course, there is a lot going on. There's a lot going on with your feats, your actions, skills, all of those sorts of things. But in the end, your action resolution still essentially boils down to rolling a 20-sided die, using your modifiers, and looking to meet or exceed a specific number. Fairly easy. I do know Pathfinder over the years, especially first edition Pathfinder, really got the reputation of it being Math Finder. I got to be honest, especially in second edition, you're not looking at any more math being involved as opposed to most games of fifth edition Dungeons and Dragons. Could there be a little bit more math? Yes. But it's nothing that's going to completely derail the proceedings as you're playing. I will point out, though, I am kind of surprised we now have a streamlined character sheet, which I really like, but it is missing some spots for you to add your modifiers to it. So I was kind of surprised by that. I will take a guess that we are going to be able to see an updated character sheet. If it's not already out, I'm sure it is on the very near horizon. All right, we've got various different gear and weapons, armor, shields, all within the book here, all various different equipment, but you will not find treasure. Treasure is in the GM core. I know some people have complained about that, but the reality is, myself as a game master, I prefer to have that in a game master facing book. I don't want my players to know about every stock magic item that's in the core book. No, absolutely not. To me, that ruins the fun of being a game master and introducing your players to a variety of different magic items. Okay, speaking of magic, so there have been some big changes with magic. First of all, gone are the various different schools of magic. So we no longer have I think it was 8 off the top of my head, various different schools of magic. Also, magic users are no longer trained in a particular sort of magic. So you may have had wizards who were trained in arcane spells and arcane spell attacks. Now, all magic users are trained in magical spells, magical attacks. Makes life a lot easier. Now, we still have some different kinds of spells. So we have our arcane spells, we've got divine spells, we've got occult spells, and then we also have primal spells. But gone are my wizard belongs to this school of magic, so these are the kind of spells that they're able to use. So it has opened up the magic using classes as well as other classes that players, as they advance their characters, decide to kind of dip their toes into magic using classes. Makes things far, far simpler. Something else that's now changed with the magic system in Pathfinder is we no longer have it broken up where, oh, well, some spells you needed to be able to speak an incantation, and other spells you needed to be able to make gestures, and other spells you just needed to take out some ingredients. None of that anymore. Now, spellcasters cast their spells by speaking. So if the player character cannot speak for some reason, if they're silenced, they cannot cast spells unless that is something that has been discussed with the game master when creating the character. So maybe they have some sort of a special ability, or maybe they happen to be a mute magic user. Okay, that's fine. There's going to be a different way that they're going to cast spells. But in general, you are looking at the spellcasters must be able to speak and recite an incantation to cast spells. So, something else I have seen with the spells, some of the lower level spells that would rank up and do more damage as the player character went up in level have been tweaked. So they are not as powerful. So some of these lower level spells, which higher level characters would continue to reserve spell slots for, are just not as good as they were in second edition. So it looks to me, once again, I am not an expert on Pathfinder second edition, but it does look to me as if the players will tend to leave some of these lower level spells behind as they advance, as opposed to keeping some of them around. So one of the examples is, I think the spell's called Produce Flame, which even at higher levels, a character would still have that because they ranked that up and caused more damage. Now, not the case. So something else, we have the focus points for focus spells. So there are some casters who use focus points. So that's important to keep in mind. That's been tweaked a little bit, but not radically as far as I could tell. So then we start getting into playing the game. So all your core rules are going to be right here. I will point out there is a lot of information in this book, and there are certain items that get repeated a few different times, which I like. I do like the cross-referencing. I especially like that. And of course, we have a very useful glossary and index at the end of the book. But strangely enough, there are a few things that I encountered where kind of conflicts a little bit. I know, as I mentioned, that errata came out, so that should help clear some of those things up. It looks like there were some areas in this book where it's the original wording from the second edition core book that just wasn't changed. But as far as the rules to this game, it is crunchier than 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons, but it is far better constructed than 5e D&D because there are rules for a lot of situations, a lot of things going on, and 5e D&D, a lot of dungeon masters have to kind of do things on the fly. Well, there's not a rule for that. So all right, I'm going to make a judgment on that. And that's fine. There's no problem with doing that because that's how role-playing games have always been. But with Pathfinder, there are a lot of situations where we do have various different rules for, so it's a far more uniform game. Now, this remastered edition of the Player Core, the presentation is excellent. Reading through this, had a far easier time understanding the key concepts of Pathfinder with this new remastered Player Core book. Love it. Love it a lot. If you follow the Gaming Gang channel, you know I am a fan of Pathfinder. I like the system. I like the 3-action economy because there's so many things that the players can do. I love the fact that the way the game is designed is that your player characters cooperate together. It gives you kind of an X-Men feel to it, where the X-Men doing their Fastball Express with Colossus and Wolverine. I love how the various different feats and specialties of the different backgrounds, character classes, ancestries combined together, and your players will work together to solve problems and to be victorious in combat, far more so, at least in my opinion, than in most other fantasy role-playing games, including D&D. All right, so we're going to get into our effects and conditions, the different modes of play. So we have encounter mode, which is when you've got combat or where the timing is just seconds at a time. So you're looking at each round is 6 seconds. So we go from encounter mode to exploration mode. Exploration mode, now we're looking at minutes. So time passes in minutes or maybe even hours. And then we have downtime mode, which you're looking at the time passes in hours, days, weeks, maybe even months, or possibly years. And you will segue from the various different modes during an average session of Pathfinder. All right, so we're going to wrap up with our appendix of conditions, our new character sheets, and then the glossary and index, which I like quite a lot. This was also in the second edition core book, where if you're looking to try to find something, it's an index, but it's also a glossary that's going to give you the key points of those entries as well. All right, that is the look inside Pathfinder Remastered Player Core. So let's swing on over to the other camera. I'm going to share some final thoughts and give this a review score. So as I've already pointed out, if you follow the gaming gang, you know I like Pathfinder. I think Paizo Inc. is a great company. They're always super nice to me. They really go out of their way to provide me with just about everything that comes out for Pathfinder and Starfinder. So I have absolutely no issues with the company whatsoever. They are top notch every time I deal with them. As far as the remastered books, I understand there are people out there who are upset that we have these remastered books now, and they don't feel that there was any reason for the remastered player core, GM core, the upcoming monster core, as well as next summer's player core 2. But here's the reality. Paizo is a company that was built essentially on Dungeons and Dragons. That's how they started out. And then they branched off with Pathfinder, which many people refer to as essentially Dungeons and Dragons 3.75. Then second edition came along, and there was a further break away from Dungeons and Dragons. But there was still tons of material that was tied into the SRD, the System Reference Document. And that was a huge problem. And that is a huge problem for any publisher that is out there who is still beholden to Wizards of the Coast and the open game license. You cannot have a company that, if for some strange reason, like we saw back in January, things were not looking good for third-party content creators for 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons and any edition of Dungeons and Dragons. You cannot have a company that is based on another company's IP. You just can't, with the risk that at any point the rug could be pulled out from under you and you can no longer create content for that IP or built upon that IP. So I understand these two core books are each $59.99. I get it. You know, times are tough. Will point out, I say this all the time, tabletop gaming is one of the best values as far as entertainment that you can find. Just figure core book for a role-playing game, okay, let's say it's $60. All right, family of 4 goes to the movies twice. They've probably spent $60, and there's no guarantee that those movies were any good. Keep your fingers crossed that they were. So I understand that. And I understand people don't like change a lot of times, especially with their role-playing games. But here we're not really seeing a radical change in Pathfinder 2nd Edition. It is just an update, making it far clearer in many ways. There are still some areas where there's a little confusion. One section says one thing, and then you read further on, and you're like 100, 200 pages later, you're like, wait a second, now you're saying it's this? I guarantee that'll get cleaned up and may already all be cleaned up with much of the errata that came out. There's also the issue that people had where there was the change with how lethal the game is. Well, funny thing is, the designers were looking to make the lethality higher in Pathfinder 2nd Edition and also in Remastered. People pushed back on that. And now we also have this in the errata, which now gives you the option of essentially not adding wounds to the dying level of a player character as you take more damage as a dying character. So I'm not going to get into all the mechanics involved in it. But once again, you have an option of, do you want to play it like some of the designers wanted it to be, or do you want a little less brutality at your game table during combat? Completely up to you. I really, really dig what I have found in the player core for Pathfinder Remastered. This is a fantastic introduction to newcomers to Pathfinder. And if you're interested in a much more in-depth fantasy role-playing game, or a fantasy role-playing game that offers you far more player character customization, or you're looking for a fantasy role-playing game where your character really stands out from all the other characters in the group, that there isn't a ton of overlap, where you really do specialize in important things in the adventuring, you've got to take a look at the remastered Pathfinder, because it is that good. It is one of the best fantasy role-playing games out there today. Now, I do want to wrap up by also pointing out, as I record this, there are still 11 days left for you to jump on board with the special Humble Bundle. It is a Pathfinder 2nd Edition. I think they're calling it the Legacy Bundle. You can get the core book, the bestiaries, the advanced player guide, all of that for a donate. I mean, there's, I think all in all, it's something over 40 PDFs for a $25 donation. And you can actually go in lower than that and just get the core rulebook. So if you're interested in Pathfinder and you're maybe a little leery about spending $59.99 on the player core, as well as $59.99 for the GM core, so together you are looking at $120 plus tax. If you're a little shy about that, I completely understand. By all means, if you're not familiar with Pathfinder, go to Humble Bundle and pick up any variation of that bundle, which includes the core rulebook and the bestiary. You'll get a feel for what Pathfinder is. Like I said, this remastered edition, far easier to understand and get started with. It feels a little streamlined. So much easier for most players who are not familiar, even with any role-playing games, to wrap their heads around. So if you are a little leery about picking up these new remastered core books, grab that bundle of holding, take a peek, then you'll have a much better feel for if Pathfinder is right for you and your group. But for myself, I think this is an excellent tome. Really, really like it. Yeah, okay, there are some quibbles, of course. No role playing game is perfect. No fantasy role playing game is perfect. Close your eyes, and now you're looking at the perfect fantasy role playing game. It doesn't exist. But I'll tell you what, they're starting to get close. And this is about as close as it comes if you are looking for a crunchy, detailed fantasy role playing game with depth and a ton of content as well. Kudos to Paizo Inc. on a fantastic job with the player core for Pathfinder Remastered. I give the player core a 9 out of 10 on a scale of 0 to 10. I think it is that good, and it probably belongs in your collection if you have any interest in fantasy role playing games. All right, that is it for this time out. If you like this video, by all means, please give it a quick thumbs up. Subscribe to the Gaming Gang channel if you haven't already, and if you do subscribe, don't forget, ring that bell. It'll not only let you know when I upload videos such as this review, it'll also inform you when my live stream, the Gaming Gang Dispatch, airs Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday evenings right here on YouTube at 7 p.m. Central. And of course, when you're not watching videos on the Gaming Gang channel, be sure to visit thegaminggang.com for all latest in tabletop gaming news, reviews, and a whole lot more you won't find here on the channel. You know the drill. Get your geek on at thegaminggang.com. Once again, I'm Jeff McAleer. Thank you very much for watching. Happy holidays to all of you. And until I see you next time, here's hoping every one of you gets to enjoy plenty of great gaming with your gang.